Well, we've been trying for a long time to actually build a sense of community at the school, build a sense of community for the youngsters who are coming here, but also the community around us in the wider sense. And first of all, developing the orchard was a good way of doing that. Then we've got a big part of the field leased out to Trent Cricket Club, and now the farm is becoming more and more an integral part of that, and trying to teach people that, you know, a chicken doesn't appear on Tesco's plucked on the shelves. Actually, there's a lot that leads up to that, and we're trying to also do our bit for the world by trying to sustain rare breeds and teach youngsters about rare breeds. So we're actually building capacity, and we hope that in years to come some of our youngsters will be looking after their own rare breeds in their own back garden.
Well, there's an awful lot of breeds, ancient breeds, that have been in Britain for hundreds and hundreds of years, which tend to be overlooked these days because they don't produce as many eggs as the new hybrid super chickens do. They don't put on weight as quickly as the new hybrids do, so they're less useful commercially for egg production and meat production. But these breeds have been around and have been part of the scenery for millennia, really. So what we're trying to do is keep those breeds going, in conjunction with places like the Rare Breed Survival Trust. There's a lot of people who are breeding these rare breeds, keeping the gene pools going, swapping bloodlines, which is what we're trying to do, to keep the biodiversity, if you like, of the domesticated stock.
We started off having just grass land here, and my involvement right from the start, getting diggers in, digging the holes, putting the posts in to support the trees, And everything else, getting the children in to come and plant the trees, 800 odd of them, planting trees in 1 week. That was fantastic, actually. It was great, yeah. And everything else afterwards, looking after the trees, tending them, putting up the espaliers, anything practical, I think. And I get involved in the meetings as well. I go to the meetings, steering group meetings, where they talk about what's going to happen next, what stalls we're going to at which shows, etc., etc. Yeah. Okay, a lot of them just love being outdoors, which is great. Like to see them run around, and because it's a safe area for them to run around. But I also try and explain to them that from the trees you can see buds now, which is a brilliant time of year to see buds. Buds will become flowers, and then the flowers will start to get bigger, and the petals will fall off, and we'll end up with a fruit, with an apple, plum, whatever. And I'm hoping that they start to realize that fruit does come from trees. They have to develop, they have to be looked after, and it's not just a matter of going to the supermarket and get it off the shelf. Yeah.
From a personal point of view, I think that this is a wonderful project to have what is seemingly the largest orchard in the whole of the National Forest here in an urban environment. It's just absolutely fantastic that so much time and effort has been put in, and the rewards for the community are many, so many, that children get to see where their food comes from and to appreciate that it does take a lot of hard work to create the fruit that we find on our tables.
What we're trying to do is, when we're creating things, we're trying to use as much recycled materials as is physically possible. This is great for in the children's future, where recycling will be hopefully second nature to them. So, for example, we use tyres, second-hand tyres, as raised beds for potato production. Absolutely brilliant. We're using recycled wood. We're using wellies as planters, old bean tins to actually grow things in. As much of the recycled materials as we can possibly use, we intend to. Right, this is, to the untrained eye, it just appears to be a large lump of bark, chipped bark, which I suppose it is. What we're trying to do with this is we're going to create pathways around the farm for disabled access, and to obviously keep the children's feet dry in the wetter periods. So we've been getting this material from the county council. It's a waste product. It's not used for anything else. We get it dumped here, and we're going to be spreading it around as paths. Again, just shows the recycle, reuse. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to get the children to understand that when they go, or when the parents go down to the supermarket, food's not just miraculously appeared on the shelves. It's taken an awful lot of time and energy and effort on somebody's part to produce it. We're also trying to show that an awful lot more fruit and veg can be grown in this country rather than having a huge carbon footstep from bringing it in from abroad. With things like this polytunnel behind me, we can produce an awful lot more tender veg and force it on. Okay, we can get earlier crops and a higher yield. Right, I'll introduce you to this one first. This one's called Bertie. Bertie Bum Squeeze is his name. And Bertie's a 3-year-old barn owl. He was captive bred by friends of mine, and he's what we call a complete imprint, which means that the first thing that he saw, instead of being his proper mum's face, another barn owl's face, was, unfortunately for him, my hairy old face. So, the first thing a bird sees, it thinks it's its mother. So unfortunately now he's 3 years old. I'm not his mum, I'm his girlfriend, and it makes him very much more relaxed around people. The reason he's called Bertie Bum Squeeze is when he hatched, he was about as big as a child's thumb, all bare and pink and wrinkly, no feathers on him, his little eyes sealed shut, and at about 4 days of age the eyes open and he sees the world for the first time. Now when they're babies, what they try and do is they try and get rid of the droppings, the poo, away from the nest. So they'll wriggle backwards, sticking the bottom out, and it's just like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. Hence why he's called Bertie Bum Squeeze. He's a very cute little chappie. Predominantly flies at night. As a general rule, owls with dark eyes fly at night. Owls with yellow, silver or orange eyes fly in the daytime. Right, the second bird that I've got to show you is a little owl, and he is a small owl, but that's the technical name is a little owl. He's again, like Bertie, he's a complete imprint. The noise that he's making is he's talking to me as he would his mum or his girlfriend, but for his size he is a particularly unpleasant little chap, and he goes by the name of Mr. Tumble, don't you? You notice little yellow eyes, unlike the barn owl who flies at night, is nocturnal. Little owls tend to come out in the daytime. Big feet for a little body. They don't hunt voles and little mice like the barn owls do. These things predominantly hunt little beetles and worms and creepy crawlies. Yeah? You notice he's got huge big long legs. He's very closely related to burrowing owls, which have got even longer legs, and they're designed for running around. If you're looking for worms and insects, you might as well run around as fly around. Right. And this is Nipper, who's a 6-year-old Saker falcon. Very similar in shape and design to your native peregrine falcon. Big long sabre-shaped wings, big long tail. I'll show you from the back. He's a bird catching bird. He knows what he is. He knows he's a Saker, and he's a beautiful, beautiful little bird. These birds are trained to catch other birds, predominantly, and you train them to what's called a swung lure, which is a piece of leather on a long line with his dinner tied to it, which he'll chase and try and attack. think everybody who comes here, from the smallest to the oldest children, gets something slightly different. We try and tailor the talks to the individual group. The younger children, it's brilliant so that they can come, they can feed the chickens, they can see the variety of things, they can see how everything's growing. The older children we can get much more in depth with. We can get them doing slightly more technical jobs. Overall, I think it will work for everybody from, I don't know, a couple of years upwards.
When it came down to it, this boy loved everything about living on a farm. He loved the fresh air, he loved the fact that it was in the country and it was quiet, but best of all, he loved all of the food that came from the farm. He would sit and he would tuck into moist, salty chicken. He would eat apples that had come from the apple trees. When his mother made something with pears, he would be the first in line to come and sit and gobble it all up. But when it came to working, he was not very good. His mother would say, "Please, will you go out and collect the chickens' eggs? Please, because I need them to help me do some baking." And he would sit and he would look and he wouldn't do a thing. When his father said, "The corn needs planting. We need to dig the soil, plant the corn and hope that it will grow," did he get up? No, he didn't. He would be asked to go and help to milk the cow. And did he do it? No, not a thing. He wouldn't do anything around that farm. And yet, he still loved to sit and eat his dinner, and drink milk, and eat fruit, and eat bread and corn, and he still would do nothing. Now, the seasons change, and sometimes there isn't that much work to do on a farm other than make sure that the land is kept well and make sure that the cows and the chickens and the goats and the sheep are well. But he knew that as the seasons changed, then he was going to have his birthday soon. He smiled. He thought to himself, all of the good things that he would have, all of the good things that he could eat, and the thing that he really liked the best was the birthday cake. That made his mouth water. He licked his lips, thinking of that cake and how he would have everything, sitting in the farmhouse eating his birthday cake. The time was getting closer, and he was asked if he would go and collect the chickens' eggs, and he said no. He was asked if he would go and help to get some of the corn, and he said no. And he wouldn't go out and he wouldn't help to milk the cow to get some milk to make into butter. He just sat there and waited, thinking all of the time about his birthday cake. And when the morning of his birthday came, he looked and he saw that he did have some presents, but all he could really think about was his birthday cake. He could hear everybody very excitedly making sure that the tea was set, and he looked and he saw that there were sandwiches, and there was jelly, and there was some fruit, but he couldn't see the birthday cake. And he looked, and he tried not to, but he had a small tear in the corner of his eye. He said, "Where's my birthday cake?" And his father said, "Did you help to collect the chickens' eggs?" And the boy said, "No. I wonder how you could make a cake without eggs." His mother said, "Did you help to sow the corn and grind it up to make the flour?" And the boy said, "No, I didn't." His sister said, "You didn't help me to milk the cows to get the milk to make the cake, and there you would need to make the butter. And did you help me?" And he said, "No." And he realised if he had helped, then he would have been able to have that birthday cake. if he'd helped to collect the eggs, if he'd helped to make the flour, if he'd helped to collect the milk, if he'd helped to make the butter. And I'll tell you something, from that time, if he was asked to help to go and collect the chicken's eggs, he would always say, yes. If he was asked to help to collect the milk, he would always say, yes. And the same went for planting the corn and cutting the corn and grinding the corn to make the flour. He would always say, yes. Because he knew that birthday cakes didn't come from nowhere, that they needed people to help to get the eggs, the milk, the butter and the flour. And he always had, from that time, the best birthday cakes, because he knew he had helped. There were not many things that this little girl liked, but there was one thing that she loved, and that was to eat an apple, or maybe a pear. She loved how sweet they were, how hard and crunchy, soft and sweet they could be. But one day when she went outside and the rain was falling down, she looked and she said, "I don't like the rain." And her father just smiled. "Oh, you'll like the rain someday," he said. "But I don't like the rain." When the wind had blown and the rain had dried up and it was light and warm outside, she could hear something that she didn't like. And there were lots of things that she didn't like. And one of the things that she didn't like were bees. The bees were buzzing this way and that. And she went, "I don't like bees, I really don't like them." And her father just smiled. "Oh, you'll like bees someday. You'll see how good they can be." And the girl just went, "I don't like bees." But all of the wet on top of the soil had made worms come up to the top of the ground, and they were wriggling this way and that, slimy and round and long and thin and hairy and thin, and she went, I don't like worms. And as she was running away from the worms, she saw that there were some slugs and snails. I really don't like slugs and snails. But her father just smiled and said, you'll like worms someday. You might even get to like slugs and snails. You'll see just how good they can be. I don't like worms or slugs or snails, the girl said. As she sat down, eating a round, red, juicy apple, she was loving the way that it tasted on her lips, teeth and tongue. She followed that by eating a pear. She liked the way it was a little bit harder than an apple, crunchier, grittier than an apple. She loved the way that it tasted. And then she could see, coming out of the sky, lots of birds. And the birds were flying this way and that, and down they came, and she went, I don't like birds, but I do like apple. And so she had a second apple. Her father just smiled and said, you'll get to like birds someday. You'll see just how good they can be. The very next day, it wasn't too hot and it wasn't too cold, and the mother and father said to the girl, we're going to take you to an orchard. The girl went, an orchard? An orchard? What's an orchard? They smiled and they said, oh, you'll see. I think you'll like it. They had to drive quite a long way to come to a huge field that was filled with trees that had on them apples and pears and damsons and plums and cherries. The girl licked her lips and she rubbed at her tongue. I don't know what an orchard is, but I like this place. And it was then that her mother and father said to her, well, an orchard is a place where they have trees, lots of trees, but not ordinary trees, trees where you grow fruit. Do you like fruit? Oh yes, I really like fruit, me. I love fruit, me. But as she looked around, she could see that there were some bees flying about. She went, I don't like bees. And then as she looked, she could see that the bees were landing on the fruit trees and making sure that the apples could grow from out of the flowers. Do you know, I can see that bees are quite good things. Her dad didn't say anything. He just smiled. In the middle of all of this good weather, the rain started to pour. The girl went, I don't like rain. But her father said, if there wasn't any rain, then the trees couldn't grow. And if the trees couldn't grow, then you couldn't have apples and pears to eat. The girl went, I quite like rain, really. I don't want to get wet, but if it makes apples grow, then it's a good thing. As she was going through all of the trees, all of the orchard, all of the fruit trees, she looked on the ground, and what could she see? She could see that there were slugs and snails and worms. I don't like slugs. But her father said, on the trees, some of the apples fall onto the ground. And to help them rot and go into the soil to make the trees grow, you've got to have slugs and snails and worms to help it make the soil good for the apple trees, to make sure the apples will grow. They go, well, I suppose I quite like slugs and snails and worms if they help the trees to grow. The girl loved going round the orchard. She didn't eat too many apples or too many pears or too many cherries or too many plums, but they took some home. And from that time, whenever it rained, she would go, I can see that the rain's going to make the apple trees grow. When she saw the bee flying, I can see that the bees help the apples to grow. when she saw the birds that would come down and peck at the apples and make it good for the animals to eat the apples to make them grow into the soil, she went, I don't really mind seeing the birds in the sky, especially if they eat all of the other things that help to make the apples grow. And from that time, if she saw a bird, or a worm, or a slug, or a snail, or if it started to rain, she would whisper under her breath, "Thank you. You help to make the apples grow." At the top of a tall hill, there was a house. And in the house, the mother was trying to cook the dinner. Her little son, he had done his homework, he had tidied his room. But when he went up to his mother, he said, "I'm bored." She was trying to cook the dinner. And it was as she was trying to cook the dinner, she looked and she smiled. "Why don't you go and find the house that's yellow and red?" The little boy looked puzzled. "The house that's yellow and red? Well, that's easy. That's Grandma's house down at the bottom of the hill." "Well, why don't you just go and visit your Grandma?" The boy went out through the door, ran down the hill as fast as he could, and when he got to his Grandma's house that was yellow and red, he rat-a-tat-tatted on the door. The door creaked open, and there stood his Grandma. He said, "Grandma, Grandma, Grandma, my mum has sent me out to go and find a house that's yellow and red, and that's your house." His Grandma smiled and looked at him and said, "Do you mean the yellow and red house that's filled with sunshine?" "The yellow and red house that's filled with sunshine? Grandma, 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 where's that?" She said, "I'll tell you after you've washed the dishes." "Wash the dishes?" And the little boy had to get up on top of a stool, and he stood by his Grandma's sink and he washed the dishes, and when he'd finished he said, "Grandma, Grandma, Grandma, where is the yellow and red house that's filled with sunshine?" She said, Do you mean the yellow and red house that's filled with sunshine, that's got 5 trees inside of it? Grandma, 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 where is that? She said, you'll have to go and ask your sister. My sister? But her house is on the other side of the hill. I know, said the grandma. He jumped up and he ran around the side of the hill, and when he got there, he rat-a-tat-tatted on the door, and he went, sister, 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 and the door opened up. And there stood his sister looking at him, and he said, sister, 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 do you know where the yellow and red house is? That's filled with sunshine, and it's got 5 trees inside of it. His sister said, yes. Do you mean the yellow and red house that's filled with sunshine, that's got 5 trees inside of it, that holds a star in its centre? The little boy looked. A yellow and red house that's filled with sunshine, that's got 5 trees in it, that's got a star in its centre. Do you know where that is? And his sister said, yes, but I'll only tell you after you've swept the floor. Sweep the floor? And the boy started to sweep the floor, and he swept, and when he'd finished he said, sister, 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 where's the yellow house that's filled with sunshine, that's got 5 trees inside of it, and it's got a star inside of it? Do you know where that is? And his sister said, do you mean the one that's as sweet as honey? As sweet as honey? Where is it? She said, you're going to have to ask our mum. Our mum? And the boy ran all the way back up to the top of the hill, and when he got home he rat-a-tat-tatted on the door, and he said, Mum, 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 where is the yellow house that's filled with sunshine, that holds 5 trees, that's got a star inside, and is as sweet as honey? Do you know where it is? And his mother said, yes, but I'll tell you after you've had your dinner. The boy sat down and he scratched at his chin and he rubbed at his head, and he thought to himself, I hope she's going to tell me soon, because I just don't know. And he ate his dinner, and then he said, Mum, 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 where is the yellow house that's red, that's got sunshine inside of it, holds 5 trees, it's got a star in its centre, and is as sweet as honey? And here his mother reached behind her back, and as she reached, she pulled out from behind her an apple. The boy looked.